So we're going to display the LCR Dice Game, left, center, right Dice Game code in action here. So I'm going to run it. So we see, opens up, says this game requires 3 or more players. The input is controlled, and will continue until it receives a valid answer. Next, it asks for names of the players. We'll enter the names, so we can see right after that the rules are displayed regarding setup, the dice, the chips, how to win. Then we see begin round run, and it's displaying how many dice the player rolls, then each of the rolls, what happened, who received the chips. So you can see this one continued, round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5, round 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up to 11. Here we see that Briggs is the winner with 1 chip remaining. Then it pauses. So a couple things we could do. We should probably display the rules before immediately asking for input here. Then we need to add some kind of delay here so that the user can read, because once all the information is entered, it displays the rules and then it just immediately streams everything. So we might want to pause for space or enter something between each round so the user can see what's happening. And then it goes to the end. So we can see that the code is completing its function, but it's not very user friendly. There's definitely some improvements that could be made on the output side. Hello, we will be reviewing the main game file for the LCR Dice game, and we will start in the main method. So we can see here we have declared an integer num players equal to 0. So the naming convention is camel case. We'll make sure that's consistent throughout our code. You see we have space between the operators for clarity. Next, we're seeding our random number generator. Let's make sure that the outcome isn't the same every single time. Alright, so now we're entering a while loop that has a comment, continues until a valid number of players is received, 3 or more. Then once this exits, the players vector is resized based on the number of players that was determined inside the while loop, which is going to take advantage of the set number of players method. So then we're going to get player names. For loop, it's going to iterate through the vector and obtain a name for each player. Then we call the directions method and then the start game method. So we can see right here we have two instances where we could get rid of some comments really easy. We have start game followed by begin game, which is extremely redundant, so we could just delete that comment. And then the descriptor for the directions method says display game rules to player. So we could just add display directions and get rid of this comment as well. So now if we go up, the start game method. So starts again, integer round count equals 0, camel case, space between the operators. Another pretty redundant comment here, and it doesn't actually display the current round, it just stores it. Or in this case actually just initializes the round count variable. So then we go into the main game loop, which is going to continue while winner is not true. Here we immediately iterate our round counter, display what round we're on, go into the player's turn loop, which is going to continue for each player inside the array. First thing it does is it checks to see if the win condition's been met. If it has, it's going to break. Otherwise, we're going to start rolling the dice. So next function here is rolling the dice. See here, so we have roll count, side rolled, get number of dice. So the roll count is how many dice the player is going to roll for that turn, which is going to be determined by the number of chips that player has. Then we're going to display to the user the number of dice rolled, by that player. Then we're going to go in here and actually begin rolling the dice. So the side roll, we're going to send that here to the dice class. That's going to determine, we're going to display the roll. Then if the roll is not the dot, which is going to be the neutral one, which means no action is taken, we're going to need to adjust the chips. So we're going to call the adjust chips function. So you can also see that it is every time we adjust the chips, we need to check for a winner because the win condition could occur at any time once chips are adjusted. Then if there is the winner again, we'll break out of the loop. Otherwise, nothing happens because we got the asterisks here. So this is displaying the roll message here, which is called inside the player's rolls dice. So we got a switch statement, basically 4 options, and we did end it with a default, just like we've ended our ifs here with else's, to make sure we basically make sure that some code is implemented no matter what input was received. So you can see the comment here is a little redundant on the case 0. We have skip turn, whereas right here it's going to display the message, your turn is skipped. Then here, this one may be needed because the max dice that can be rolled is 3, but that's not clear. So we might want to display why. This comment helps make that clear. So here we have our check for winner function. So check for the win condition, which tells you right here, only one player's chips. So create this no chips integer. Now we're going to count the number of players with no chips by going through the loop and counting all the players with chips equals 0. So if no chips is equal to basically the size of the array minus 1, meaning there's only one player left with chips. Now we're going to determine who that player is. So we go right here, tells you right there, identify the winner. So unsigned, players at, then we're going to get that. We're going to go through each player in the vector. The first player found that has more than 0 chips is going to be the winner, because we already know at this point after this method that only one player left has any chips. So it's found, that player's name is displayed with how many chips they have remaining. Here we have this is one of the important functions here. This is the adjusting of the chips. So it receives the current player and what that player rolled. Now we got to determine if it was a left, center, or right. So it says right here, check for vector overrun. We might want to add a little comment block in the top to make this explicit, but basically the order of players, it's assumed that the person below the current player, as in one position lower, is on the left, one position higher is on the right. So that means that, say we were at position 0, the very first player in the array, we can't just do what here we see the normal left action, which would be -1, because that would be a vector overrun and go out of bounds and create an error. So we have to check for that condition, and then we just wrap it. So this would now, instead of going out of bounds, it would go to the player at the end of the vector as the player on the left for the player in the first position. So we don't have to worry about that if the center is rolled, because then we're just subtracting one chip into the middle. But if it's on the right, we got to worry about if we're on the end. So if we're at the player on the end, then we need to give a chip to the player at the very beginning of the vector. So that player position 0. Otherwise, it's just to the player above the current player's position. So we can see that spacing has been pretty consistent throughout. We also have the space around the operators and the indentation spacing. So here we have the directions, which we've already stated. We'll probably change this to display directions. Then we can again get rid of this redundant comment. We have string file name, find the desired file. It's not very accurate. We're kind of specifying the desired file. can see that that file over here is just a resource. So then we have stream reader. Then again, redundant, create a stream reader object. That's the whole purpose of this declaration here. String file line. Then we're going to go into the while loop. This is going to continue until we get to the end. And then we have another redundant statement here. So the console and the write line function. Its whole purpose is to display the text in console, so there's no need for this comment. So we have the set number of players function that was called in the very bottom of the main loop. So total players input. So this particular line was added because if the user entered strings or spaces and then which wasn't valid input, it would rerun this loop, but it would get stuck in an infinite loop for some reason. Right. Return the total players. Here we have this is our winner, win condition variable. So we could get rid of this comment and simply rename this boolean to win condition. Then our vector class object player of players dot library calls. So overall, we're following good spacing and naming conventions. Our one switch statement has the default statement. Our if statements are ended with else statements. There does not appear to be any leftover test stubs or routines. We do not have any unreachable code that is leaping out. We're checking for out of bounds and overrun conditions. There are a lot of redundant comments. And that is it.